and welcome to the Publishing Executive webinar, How to Create Engaging and Profitable Digital Content for Mobile and Tablet, sponsored by magplus. My name is Dennis Wilson, Editor-in-Chief of Publishing Executive and the host for today's event. Before we get started, let me take a second to point out the Tips for Attendees widget on your console. It's the blue icon with a wrench on it. If you missed the Tech Tips video we played leading up to the webinar, you can always click this widget for more information. And I also wanted to remind everyone to submit questions if you have any throughout the webinar, and we'll try to get to as many of these as we can during the Q&A portion. So let's get to the program for today. Audiences are inspired by great stories, but the techniques and tools for storytelling are evolving as readers shift to smartphones and tablets. To drive engagement in a mobile world, publishers must incorporate interactive elements such as audio, video, and animations. And new tools are enabling publishers to increase engagement and capture more revenue on mobile platforms. By taking advantage of the analytics and serving up in-app advertisements, publishers are finding new revenue and new engagement opportunities. So we have 4 fantastic speakers joining us today to explore this topic. So first we have Andrew Wong, who is Director of Business Development at magplus, a passionate technology enterprise enthusiast with 6+ years in the mobile app development space. Andrew has a penchant for delivering software solutions that meet complex business needs. Next we have David Wilson, Manager of Digital Operations and Design Studio at Mary Kay, Inc. David has nearly 30 years experience working in advertising and creative arts, and he is also a published author and an award-winning photo retoucher. Raymond Ullman is our next speaker. He's the founding editor-in-chief of Inspiccio magazine. Raymond is an artist, writer, and editor who co-founded Provincetown Arts magazine in 1985. Raymond is also the co-founder of Streamline Communications, a digital communications and education entity which became a public company as Bridgeline Digital. And currently Raymond is the founding editor-in-chief of the Inspiccio Arts publication platform, which is sponsored by the College of Communication, Architecture, and Arts at the Florida International University. And finally, we have James Arnold, Vice President of Digital at Farm Journal Media. In 2006, James joined the ad sales team with Farm Journal and swiftly moved into management in 2009. Since then, he has guided Farm Journal Media digital divisions into an ever-expanding list of product offerings. As VP of Digital, James guides digital operations and leads digital sales, predominantly in the crops, livestock, and produce categories. So thanks for all of you for joining us today and speaking. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to start things off.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Hope everyone's having a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are. As Dennis alluded to, my name is Andrew Wong, and I am the Director of Business Development at magplus. And we're very excited to be a presenting sponsor of this webinar on behalf of Publishing Executive and Dennis and Cherie and their team. So thank you very much, Dennis. And without further ado, I will dive right into my agenda here. So I'll keep it short and simple because I would much rather you folks hear from folks that are kind of on the ground floor directly than someone like myself that's more on a vendor type of level. But I did want to speak to, as someone who's kind of a vendor that works with publishers like yourselves, a couple trends that we see in the digital publishing industry, and so some best practices that I think that publishers and enterprises and folks with content all around can benefit from and implement into their strategies to really nail digital publishing. So that's why it's Insights and Trends in Digital Publishing, where we are and where we're going. So I wanted to start with just kind of a state of the union, just kind of a status quo where we are now, and some key trends that I see that are allowing us to really speak intelligently about what we think publishers should be working on over the next few years in the short term and the long term. So as you see here, we really have found that publishers are working quite diligently and expending a lot of resources to marry kind of their old legacy content, things like traditional print magazines and flyers and newsletters, with more disruptive trends. And obviously we'll speak more about, as Dennis alluded to, analytical trends, different digital media that are emerging, even things like AR and VR, which I won't get into detail on this, but forward-facing kind of leading-edge trends that we think our publishers would be interested in. And since kind of the traditional revenue streams that we think of as, hey, the monthly magazine, print media, print-based advertising. They are drying up a bit, so that's driving a need for innovative new subscription models, new monetization strategies, revenue streams, and that, of course, is driving innovation, which is always great, but needs to be done intelligently to really see success, and that's something that we want to advise on if we can. However, of course, the flip side of the coin there is that brands that, be they traditional publishers or B2B media companies, enterprises, content owners, even internal agencies, you'll hear from folks like Dave, that's almost like an internal agency to an enterprise, they still are winning through unique and high-value experiences. So I want to speak to, from a brand perspective, how we've delivered on that and what that means, and any advice we can give on how to execute that for your own content and brand. So with that in mind, the first thing I want to cover kind of specifically is key challenges that we see industry-wide in terms of what publishers are facing and what they want to win in the next few years, both short again and long term. So as I alluded to, as traditional, in quotes there, revenue streams kind of lose market share or not necessarily dry up, but we all know that there's different strategies that we want to implement as publishers. The need to take innovative risks is quite frankly forcing publishers out of their comfort zone. And the key point there is, I think we can all agree, no one wants to be that giant ship that's too big to steer, but sometimes it's all about, well, I know I need to pivot, I know I need to steer, but what does that even mean? What do I want to do? I have a certain comfort zone, I have a certain cash cow, I have a certain revenue generation paradigm, and I'm afraid to take that to somewhere where there's increasingly inherent risk in a market that's, overall drying up. So that's something that, if done intelligently, can make all the difference in the world, but needs to be very intentional and granular. And as you see there, that leads to increasingly granular strategies, particularly around analytics, metrics, and the visibility thereof. And what I mean by that is, obviously, higher-level management at a lot of publishing companies are becoming more and more aware, advertisers are becoming more and more aware exactly what's going on in terms of audience trends, different segments of a digital subscription audience, different engagement metrics, and the more visibility that's happening there, it is damaging long-held kind of performance expectations. I hear from clients all the time that, hey, we put a lot of money and effort into this kind of audience or this kind of segment, but then the analytics showed that it wasn't worth it. So from an ROI standpoint, what does that mean? How do I have to pivot? So that's the key challenge that we're seeing from a lot of our publishers is, how do I really take what my numbers are telling me and turn it into an intelligent inference that I can use to drive my business? And last but not least, what the upshot is there is that operationally, publishers really need to reconcile that. The new and innovative delivery paradigms, kind of that leading edge tech, with increasingly troublesome bandwidth and scalability restrictions. So that's particularly a refrain that I hear quite often from large and small publishers alike is, well, we have a traditional workflow, we have our revenue streams, and we have a certain amount of bandwidth and staff. So how do we scale? How do we go to this cool new kind of leading edge tech and still be able to marry that old and new? So moving on to the next slide, of course, we've covered the key challenges, so I want to cover, well, hey, who do I think is doing it right? What do I think is the answer, and what does winning mean? Who's winning and why? So I still believe, with everything that I just said and all of the clarifications that I can make, that at the end of the day, it's all about unique and well-crafted storytelling. Your brand identity still matters more than ever, and I promise you that's the case, because I hear it from our publishers, I hear it from our audiences, I hear it from enterprises, and it's a pretty common refrain across the board. So that's kind of the core of what's still most important, but obviously that manifests itself in different ways, right? So on the flip side of the coin, it's still about optimizing production efficiency, and scalability thereof, because if you have a smart workflow, if you have a smart use of your resources, then you can obviously be more efficient and win in the areas that others are failing, but that's still a must in terms of having smart technology, smart workflows, and maximizing the efficiency of your workforce. So we're going to talk a lot about innovative trends, innovative digital technology, disruptive features, and that's still as important as ever, but first and foremost comes doing what you do best. So the point there is being, a lot of people want to say, hey, I need bells and whistles, I need cool new features, and I think that's true to a degree, but that should never come at the expense of your brand identity and doing what you know you're good at as a publisher and pushing out the content that you know your audience is going to want to the media where they want to see it, and obviously continuing to make your voice heard as a unique identity and brand. But just to kind of give an example of that, and I was able to include kind of a screen capture here just to give you an idea. I'm very proud of the work that we do with New York Magazine. Unfortunately, they didn't have the commitment to be able to jump on this webinar directly, but I always like to kind of show what they're doing because I do think it's relevant in terms of some kind of traditional media, but being able to take a traditional magazine and turn it into an innovative digital experience that we can all get excited about. So I think the biggest thing for them, and I don't want to put words in anyone else's mouth but my own, but speaking to their team and speaking to the folks that kind of made this happen, I really do think the biggest thing for them is their storytelling ability and their brand identity. So that's why you see in the bullet points there, beautiful design through elegant simplicity. It's not about just adding a bunch of bells and whistles. It's not about just making the fanciest, most tech-forward app experience, web experience, what have you, to create a powerful digital product. It's really about nailing your brand identity and storytelling ability in the most elegant and simplistic way. And sometimes that means, minimal, if any, additional kind of layout or functionality work in your digital products. Sometimes it's just making it clean and simplistic enough to read on a mobile device or on a tablet so that you can nail the experience that you want your readers to have. So that's why I wrote there just the right amount of customization. And New York Mag specifically, they do take advantage of an SDK that we provide where they can actually custom develop the content that they're using our system to create. But regardless of what kind of vendors you use, what kind of workflow that you have, I think it's important to be unique. I think it's important to deliver a unique experience, but you don't want to try and do something that somebody else has nailed if you don't feel like you can nail it equally well. And to that point, simplified templated production, it really does allow them to operate with efficiency at scale. And I can speak more to this, probably that would be more an after-the-fact kind of thing, but they do have quite a number of kind of technological advancements that they've been able to make in terms of automating production, taking some of their CMS, using K4, for example, to be able to export in a templatized way that drives efficiency and minimal extra manual effort to drive cross-device, cross-functional digital content to a wide audience in as many different segments as possible. So with that said, that's kind of on the front end, but then on the back end, there's that engagement, right? We talked about analytics and metrics, and we all know how important that is, but, well, why? Because it's driving predictable revenue. And in fact, I'll allude to this a little bit more in the next slide, but using that engagement and that ability to predict your audience is going to give you a lot more predictability in terms of cutting out some of the noise that might occur, especially with the industry being the way that it is. So the example here is, this is actually from my own phone, just to make sure you knew it was sincere. I kept that little weather notification down there, but I think New York Magazine does an excellent job engaging their audience through push notifications. So that's a very specific example. We've also seen publishers use things like in-app messaging and more kind of non-traditional, if social media obviously being a big driver of that media to engage with their readership. But I do think that if you're able to segment your market into the inferences that you want to make, and if you kind of have the timing nailed, that's going to create a very powerful individualized engagement. And you can see there where it kind of says, we notice you haven't been reading, would you like to catch up with our latest content? You can actually segment your market using a lot of the smart analytics tools out there into folks that might not have read your latest content or haven't downloaded an issue in a certain amount of time, or even if they're in a certain geographical region or identify with a certain demographic that you want to self-select for. I think the smarter you can be about that, the better. And one thing that we've noticed specifically with them, but with a lot of our larger publishers, is that they're moving towards more of an all-inclusive, kind of all-access print, web, digital, app, phone and tablet with their computer web properties subscription model. So you can see they're seamlessly integrated across device targets and market segments, and what that's doing is it's driving a uniformly excellent user experience. Again, being extremely protective of that brand and its identity by crafting an experience that's cross-functional. You see this last bullet point here, well-aligned cross-device and cross-operating system. It's huge to really speak for your brand voice across all the different segments and markets where people can be interacting with your brand. And that's, of course, going to widen that experience to the largest possible market. So just in summary here, just to kind of capitalize some of the key points that I want folks to take away from this talk is, unique, high-powered experiences are still going to win the day. I really think that. I believe that in my heart to be true. It's not about the bells and whistles. It's not about looking as fancy and breaking out functionality that's bleeding edge, but that's still important, but it's okay to work within your means. Even if that means starting with something more simple. If it's something that's just a couple columns of copy and a few well-placed images, that still matters. Now, I do think that an innovative and tech-forward UI is important, but it need not come at the expense of, as you see here, efficiency, scalability, or even functionality. A lot of people make the mistake of seeing those as interrelated, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, and that's very important. And finally, engagement and monetization paradigms are rapidly evolving, and that's continuing to happen, and that's going to continue to happen, and I really do feel that that's what's going to separate good from great. So I hope you keep that in mind, and I hope that's something that can help you win at the end of the day. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great, and maybe we can come back to some of the points you made with some questions. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Dave at Mary Kay.
Howdy, everybody. My name is David Wilson. I'm the manager of digital operations and design studio at Mary Kay Incorporated, and I'm very pleased to be talking to you today. Mary Kay has been doing digital publishing for many years now, but we recently switched vendors to magplus, and we kind of decided to reinvigorate the entire line that we had. And we kind of had to do a lot of evaluation on why are we doing digital publications. And the problem with our market, not problem, but the unique thing that Mary Kay has is its sales model. We're a direct sell company. We don't sell directly to the public. So a lot of the tools that we give our sales force are print media tools that they use in the context of point of sale operations, and this includes the famous Mary Kay skincare and cosmetic parties and simple just face-to-face interactions. In the past, they used to hand a lot of brochures and catalogs to people. Of course, now we moved into the digital era, and we're trying to figure out how do the tools that tended to be traditional print publications translate now to digital. As we move forward, we realize that we have Salesforce versus consumers. Mary Kay targets mostly our own sales force because, again, we're a direct sale company. We're trying to empower our sales force to succeed on their own, and if they succeed, we succeed. We rely on them to reach out to the consumer for the most part. So as I mentioned, we need to convert our printed sales tools to and motivational products to digital. The initial, the first reaction for that was, well, let's just make PDFs of our current products and put those online. And so that's kind of where we were for a long time with a lot of our publishing. And most people seem satisfied with it, but from a design point of view, it's not the best to read online a printed piece. You almost always have to zoom in. And even on computers and desktop computers and laptops and tablets, a PDF format works pretty well, but it's still not great. But on mobile, that is a phone, a PDF just doesn't work at all. And so we were kind of stuck there going, we need to up our game. The PDF is a minimum effort. It's cheap, it's easy, and most consumers kind of go, yeah, that's fine, that's all I need. But those of us who have more user experience, knowledge, and education realize that it's a very poor user experience. So we knew we needed to move into a more engaging way and more modern way of doing our digital publications. So that's why we reached out to magplus and we came up with a strategy. First, we have our consumer-facing items, which are publications like our quarterly catalog for all of our cosmetics and skincare, and then we have product-specific catalogs and seasonal catalogs. As I mentioned, those are not our primary emphasis, believe it or not. What our primary emphasis is our Salesforce-facing tools. So these include things like our new Mary Kay digital flip chart, educational items like our Mary Kay Looks collection, and motivational items, which are our seminar awards publication and Applause magazine. Sales tools are, again, point-of-sale items. So we have, Mary Kay has a tool called the flip chart. It's actually one of our most popular printed pieces that we distribute to our sales force. And Mary Kay has a sales force that numbers in the hundreds of thousands. So what they do is they put this chart on their desk or table when they're doing a skincare party, and they flip each page to show their audience what they're doing. And then on the back of the chart, they read a little script that helps them, work through the party with questions and things like that. So it's a way of helping them do their skincare parties. We also have to educate them on how to make a look. If you can show someone a look and say, look, if you buy this certain combination of makeup and you apply it this way, you're going to have the perfect smoky eye, or the perfect winter makeup look, and that helps sell the product. It's a little bit like Andrew was talking about. You're selling the story, and that helps sell the product. And then we have to motivate our own sales force. That's probably one of the main things, if not the main thing we do as the marketing department for Mary Kay, is try to figure out how do we motivate our sales force. So we have a lot of expensive prizes and recognition that we give to our sales force. So Applause Magazine is our monthly magazine that we use to give recognition to the sales force and their accomplishments. And then if you meet certain sales levels, you win things like jewelry, necklaces, clothing, and of course the famous Mary Kay pink Cadillac. All these things you can get through achieving certain levels of sales. So one of the first things that we converted into what we call our Hero interactive format using our new digital publishing tools was our digital flip chart. It was designed to work either standalone or in conjunction with the printed flip chart. And it's graphically rich, combines photos, videos, and text, and it uses pop-up scripts for the consultants to use during their point-of-sale parties. I'm going to show you this in a minute, and you can see how we've managed to make this into what we think is a really nice publication. But here's the other critical factor in this, which is we wanted to make sure not only did we have this for tablet, emulating the print flip chart, but for mobile. And really designing for mobile to make a really good mobile experience was one of our primary objectives. And that's a completely different kind of design. It borrows much more heavily from web and responsive design than it does from print. And so it makes it where we're working with a lot of our traditional print production people, but we're also working with our digital user interface and user experience designers. So it's an interesting cross where we're combining several disciplines into one. And here's an example of the digital flip chart in the mobile version. And here, I don't know if the movie is going to work in here. Oh, I guess not. I thought so I had a movie, but it's not working in there. So I probably should have gotten some more screenshots. But anyway, the chart itself is designed, as you can see from the one screen capture there, to encapsulate the mobile format in a vertical phone format. And the sales force has really been enjoying that. The other thing that we have is the Mary Kay Looks collection. This was a new piece we just got finished producing, and this is a way that we decided to educate. It's actually a combination piece. It was done as an educational piece, but we decided but it's really about motivating the sales force to use as a sales tool for point of sale. So they can say, here's a great look for a makeup look, and if you buy all this product, you can apply this look, and this app will show you how to apply the makeup look. It's graphically rich with a combination of beautiful photography, video, slideshows, and text. The slideshows were very interesting. We decided to do on the looks a step-by-step on an actual model's face for each level of the makeup. So we had to come up with ways of making sure we stabilize the model's face in between each makeup application. It was a very interesting photo shoot to make all that happen. And it pulled off in the publication beautifully as an animated slideshow. and it features social sharing features. We actually worked with magplus to customize the interface so that we could share the videos directly with directly out of the application using the traditional share features built into iOS and Android. So they can share it obviously through social channels like Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, but they can also share these things directly through instant messaging or email. And I take it this video is not going to work either. So, fortunate.
Yeah, sorry, Dave. If only if it was built as an animation will play.
Oh, okay. I embedded video. I guess I thought that would work, but I wish I could show you some of the beautiful pages I planned to show you on there, but unfortunately I won't be able to do that. Okay, but getting back to how to measure success. So we really like the magplus platform because it allows us to use analytics, our own Google Analytics, in this, and that's something our older platform didn't allow us to do. So we're not only able to get just total number of app downloads, we're able to see the total number of publication downloads on each platform, iOS and Android, on each device, mobile and tablet. We can see the video plays. We can see article views. We can see how long people stayed in the app and things like that. We actually meet weekly with our analytics team to look at how our publications are performing. This has actually been a pretty big success. We get a lot of good advice from our analytics team on what's working, what isn't working, and maybe strategies we could try to make things work better. And we're particularly interested in things like video plays, and we can compare that to the number of video plays we get in the app versus on our website, which sometimes has the same video content. Metrics have been interesting. They show that even though probably about 60% of our sales force uses Android, we actually still get much higher numbers of Apple device downloads. This is probably not surprising to most people who understand mobile users, but it reinforced, our emphasis on, designing around the Apple devices first and then porting that to Android. What's interesting is we had the number of people as we launched on this venture last year to first start, reinvigorating our digital publishing. A lot of people thought mobile was going to completely dominate and tablets would be irrelevant. It's very true that mobile gets far more downloads, probably about 80% of our downloads, but about 20% are tablet. The more interesting statistic, though, is that the engagement as judged by time spent in the app and number of video plays and page views is much higher on tablet than it is on mobile. I think on the most recent analytic report I saw, we were getting about 2 or 3 minutes in a mobile app on average viewing versus 8 minutes on tablet. So it goes to show that tablet users are far more engaged than the mobile users. So they're not irrelevant. They're pretty important because you might have a number of people download it, but the tablet users are the ones that are most likely to be using it for the intended purpose and to be getting the most engagement out of it. Some other things that we've learned over the past year and a half of doing this is that you can't just publish and forget the publication. You have to keep attention on it through the use of social platforms and other channels such as email communications. We absolutely can see that push notifications are crucial to the success. Our last platform didn't support push notifications. And so what we can tell using our analytics is that as soon as we shoot the push notification out, the number of downloads of the new publication spikes dramatically. So if we say, hey, we've got a new issue of our digital flip chart is available, and we send out a push notification, we immediately get a huge increase in the number of downloads. But like any publication, once that first push notification comes out and the people download it, what they find is that the as expected, the number of downloads will drop over the next week or two, and that's where we've been really leveraging social media to keep the interest in the platform. We also do print articles and print publications, such as our monthly Applause magazine, and we do articles in our monthly e-newsletters as well. The digital platforms such as our e-newsletters and Facebook posts are particularly important because we can provide direct links for the audience to download the applications. So that's we found very important. And we found we were getting much better downloads. Every time we do a social post, the number of downloads spikes dramatically. Now, Mary Kay is possibly somewhat unique in that we have a huge base of Facebook followers, based on the total number of salespeople. So our followers on our closed Facebook channels, I won't give exact numbers, but numbers in the tens of thousands. So, just one Facebook post, particularly if it has more engaging content like a how-to video or a video that shows you how to use these tools in context, results in a huge number of download increases for us. So what are the next steps for Mary Kay in digital publishing? Right now we still have some lingering publications that are left over from the PDF format that we talked about before. We're in the process of converting all of those to more engaging, interactive content, and also in particular we want to make sure that everything in our publication platforms has a design for mobile layout. Again, kind of using the principles of responsive web user experience design. And we're hoping this year that we're going to start a digital version of our monthly Applause magazine. Our Applause magazine is our most important publication. It's got a very large readership, and our initial thoughts when we first started engaging with magplus is, oh, well, we'll just take our print publication and turn that into a digital version. But as time has gone on, we've been really focusing more on what kind of unique content can we deliver for monthly Applause. So let's leverage the digital platform and the Applause brand, but let's do it in a little different way that makes it unique content separate from the print magazine, which all of our sales force already gets. So we're entertaining some pretty exciting ideas on that. In fact, I'm going to be meeting next week with our Applause editorial staff to discuss options for how we can proceed forward, and there's a lot of great ideas that are already floating around the table that we're excited to get started about. And then for that, I'll just end my segment and turn it over to Raymond Ullman, founding editor-in-chief of Incipio magazine.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Ullman, and what you're looking at is a montage of e-magazine covers that were created using magplus. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story about my engagement with these magazines. I've been an artist my whole life, and I have a serious art career going with works in major museums in different parts of the world. But in 1985, I was living in the Provincetown art community, which is on the tip of Cape Cod, and almost serendipitously, like if you remember this analogy, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland saying, "Hey kids, let's put on a show." A friend of mine and I decided to start an art magazine for Provincetown in 1985, which was a printed magazine. In those days, we were still using we were waxing galleys and pasting them up and having boards photographed. And in 1988, PageMaker 1.0 came out, and we used it to lay out the magazine. And I said to myself, "Eureka, the world's going to change." And I got very involved in digital communication on a lot of different levels, including starting a company which went public in 2001. So I've had deep involvement, including with editing digital video as early as 1995. In Provincetown Arts Magazine, by the way, is still being published, so it's been successful enough that it's 33 years old now. we moved year-round to the Miami area in 2012, and I looked around, and it's obvious that the art communities here are just exploding, and I've never seen anything like how quickly art communities became relevant on a global basis. And so I thought, you know, what this town really needs is a serious, high-quality, in-depth art magazine. And I wasn't sure if I was going to do for-profit or non-for-profit, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to do print or digital. And in the process of looking around, I was doing a portrait of a very large-scale portrait of the guy who read a poem at Obama's inauguration, Richard Blanco, and he said, you know, you really should talk to my friends at Florida International University. Make a long story short, I met with the dean of the College of Communication, Architecture plus the Arts, which covers all art disciplines, and he said, this is exactly what I want to do. It's been in my strategy through the year 2020. I'll finance this, and you don't have to sell ads. We'll just provide the money for it. And I thought, well, that's a lot easier than developing an ad team and starting to sell ads in a market that I've never participated in before. So that was the direction that that we went in. And almost from the very beginning, we had the New Yorker is my favorite magazine and has been my role model, and I called them up and asked them about their digital presence. And they said that a third of their readers read digital only, a third read print only, and a third read both. But the net result was that they vastly increased the size of their audience. As you can see on this slide, the mission for the name of the magazine is Inspicio, which nobody knows how to pronounce, and that's a long story I won't go into. It was my second choice. I wanted to call it Miami Arts, but I was dealing with a university, with university lawyers. But the mission for Inspicio is to be a megaphone to the world about what's going on in the South Florida art communities. And the secondary mission is to enhance the reputation of Florida International University by producing a very high quality product. And the channels that we use to communicate the content that we're generating, we have a website, the URL is on the slide, inspicio.fiu.edu. We have the e-magazine that we use magplus for, and right now we're only producing it for iPads and iPhones. The very best experience of Inspicio is to read it on an iPad, and we have a lot of video in the magazine, and so it's much easier to see it on the iPad. And if you want to download it for yourself, just go to the App Store and search for Inspicio, and it's a free installation and free magazines. We also distribute through something called Digital Commons, and that's an international archival network that includes 500 participating universities. And the result is that we have downloads of articles happening all over the world, and I'll show you a slide about that in a minute. And then we use Facebook and Instagram and e-blasts. Through our college, we have an e-blast or a mailing list of 14,000 people, and occasionally I get access to the entire university mailing list, which is 250,000 people. From the beginning, the written content has been a blend of faculty, students, and my own personal network of very high-quality writers who write for the New Yorker magazine, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and publications like that. All of that content comes to us for free because I don't have a budget to pay for it. And we decided to have running themes that would go through the magazine. If you imagine that all the art disciplines, architecture, dance, music, theater, film, visual art, etc., are silos, vertical silos, and the themes that we're following, climate change, sea level rise, and immigration, which are all particularly important to South Florida, are like horizontal bands that impact all the different art disciplines. We also do a lot of photo essays, and again, we have very high quality photographers who, like one of them, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Will Smith, made statements that this guy was their favorite photographer, and we have people who photograph architecture for the New York Times and people like that. But the heart and soul of what we're doing is video, and the reason for that is I quickly realized that I didn't have enough resources to actively pursue and manage having a staff of writers, and also a number of writers started kind of grumbling that they wanted to get paid. So with video, there is an endless stream of high talented, prominent people in the arts that have some connection to Miami or pass through here on a regular basis. And so we've had access to Pulitzer Prize winners, Academy Award winners, Grammy Award winners, etc. And we've done over 100 interviews in the few years that we've been doing this. And we've come up with a kind of unique way to present the videos, which I'll show you an example of. But basically, we take an hour-long interview and break it down into, say, 25 clips that are on average are 30 seconds to 5 minutes, and each clip is the answer to one question. And rather than have myself in every single video, and I think we've got something like 18,000 clips now, rather than have myself in every video clip that's an answer to a question starts with the question as white text on a black screen. And the biggest kind of production boost I've had from being at the university, and my office is in the School of Communication and Journalism, is that there are a lot of students here who are really good at editing video. And so I have a paid student internship program where I have students constantly working on editing the video interviews, and we're about to turn the whole experience into a class where I'll have 20 people working on various aspects of magazine production. So this screen is an example of the distribution of article downloads through Digital Commons, and you can see they're being downloaded in South Korea and China and New Zealand, South Africa. It's all over the world, and that's been a very interesting source for dialogue with a global audience. So where we're at strategically right now is that the first thing we wanted to do was develop a proof of concept that we could produce a very high quality publication that we could be proud of. And the feedback we've received from people that are engaged in the publishing industry, like people at the New York Times and people at the Wall Street Journal and people like that, has been very positive. So we feel good about what we're doing. And to reference what Andrew said earlier, that content is king, well, we know we have that part of the puzzle nailed down, but we're kind of like in a turret where we got a lot of other work to do. And I always say that in any endeavor, there's always something that's the hardest thing to do, which will always be the toughest nut to crack. And for us, that's growing the global audience that we want to grow, because we're not so much worried about, or we're not at all worried about traditional revenue generation, but we do want to have a very large global audience at some point. I went to a talk given by Tina Brown at the Miami Book Fair the other night, and if you don't know Tina Brown, she was the editor of Vanity Fair for a long time, and the person who made it successful. And then she moved over to the New Yorker for a while, and then she founded the Daily Beast. So she's got incredible creds in publishing. And one of the things she said was that screens have won the battle as the primary source of information. And so I'm taking that to heart. I was really pushing to get a budget to do a printed magazine, but I'm not as eager to do that anymore as I was 6 months ago. So one of the things I realized at this point is that I have a advantage being in a university in that I have access to a lot of smart people who want to contribute to the magazine. But what I don't have is the ability to control my own financial resourcing in the same way I would if I was in an independent company. So the place, one of the places I'm focusing on now is how to raise money through grants and donations and things of that sort. And I'm making a much stronger effort there. And I should add that last bullet that says I'm actually not allowed to sell ads by the university. So that really curtails what I can do. It's not even, I'm not even allowed to have like sponsorship mentions like NPR does. So I'm trying to raise money to develop a really high quality, high-skilled, full-time marketing, PR, social media, and audience acquisition team, and that's kind of the next step for the magazine. So just to show you a quick example of some of the stuff that we're doing, this slide shows 12 examples of thumbnails of articles that cover things as diverse as architecture at the end of the 21st century and how to accommodate sea level rise and create canals and things like that. There's another story on a Pulitzer Prize winner, a video interview with a Pulitzer Prize winner named William Finnegan, who is very involved with environmental issues. There's excerpts from a novel about what conditions are going to be like at the end of this century, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to dig a little deeper, this is an introductory video screen for an interview with a fellow named Xavier Cortada, who has gained some national prominence. He has a science background and an art background, and he's able to blend the two together into all kinds of performance art and visual art projects. He's done projects in Antarctica. He's done projects where he's got people planting mangrove seeds all over Florida and things of that sort. And this is the introductory video, and then this is an example of how we break an hour-long video down into a video interview down into much shorter video clips where each clip is answering a question. So that's the general nature of what we're doing. I got to tell you that this has been an amazing amount of fun for me, and working on the blend of various technologies, including magplus, and I have to give a shout out to Andrew, who is a great resource every time I go to get started again on producing the next issue and forget how I did things a few months ago. And so it's been, I hope you'll all look at the magazine and send me your feedback on what you think of it. And now
Thanks, Raymond.
I'll give it over to James Arnold, who's the VP of Digital Farm Journal Media.
Thanks, Raymond. I'm just going to jump in real quick. We're going to probably go over a couple minutes, but I want to make sure James has enough time. So if folks can stick around for a couple minutes, we might go 2 or 3 over. But James, go ahead.
Hey, sure. This is James Arnold. I'm going to take this a little bit different direction and take it more into our broadcast and what we do in the area of audio. So Farm Journal is a multimedia company, publishing company devoted primarily to domestic U.S. agriculture. So we have magazines, TV, radio, events. Digitally, we are in the mix in about every direction we can be. Some cases where farmers have been laggards, but other cases like mobile where they're early adopters. So I'm going to take you into podcasting. So a couple of years ago, we took our legacy radio programs into the digital environment as full-length podcasts. We housed them in our own standalone app, primarily promoted them through broadcast properties within the apps themselves. And while our own programs drove most of the usage, we also offered advertising clients the ability to house their podcasts within our app. We can make our own rules because it's in the digital arena. So we house theirs, we house ours, and we had some success there for sure. The app was launched with relatively little effort, fairly low expense. Revenues were also fairly low, only coming in from like-minded pioneers who just kind of wanted to test the waters in this niche audience. So fast forward to August of this year, part of our digital media audience study, we learned that the universe in agriculture for podcasting is, well, it's rather low, really, 20%. We believe we offer the strongest performer. The AgriTalk app here shown in this slide is ours, and so it's a top performer among podcasts, but still only a fifth of the audience has even done any level of listening to podcasts. So the glancing at the data tells us that farmers are laggards and maybe this isn't a place to spend our efforts. But then we dug a little deeper and a different story emerged. Certain segments that you would anticipate being higher, young, female, they were not. And certain segments, older farmers, were also not significantly lower. So we looked at alternative reasons why this data might be coming back, and content was absolutely a top key. So we looked where there was strong content in podcasting, there was higher usage. So agricultural retailers who are ever on the hunt for first sight wisdom, they were more than 10 points above the norm. So we see that the low adoption of podcasting is less about the technology and digital adoption and more about a lack of content. So what do? We responded by drafting our editorial team, our writers, our broadcasters, and expanding the offerings into numerous niches. So women in agriculture, new farmers just starting out, young farmers, agronomy, getting really niche into the podcast offerings. And we supported the effort by housing the podcast not just in our apps, but in whatever podcasting technology that they might be using, our users. We know probably 25 or 30% of our listens are actually from our podcast app. The rest of them come from Google Play and iTunes. So and meanwhile, we're encouraging our partners and friends to join in adding content, so customers too. A year from now, we would expect that adoption curve, that 20%, to bump up more than just a tick or two because we're driving it through our content. But you can't just say you're going to do something and not tell everybody about it and expect anybody to engage. So by expanding it into our editorial team on multiple fronts, we also have naturally created evangelizers throughout our entire organization. They want to see that their podcasts are promoted, and not just digitally, not just in an app, but now we promote appropriately wherever the audience can be touched, through audio, through digital, through TV, through print. We offer it in the app, of course, but we also suggest finding it in the other means as well. We're also rather free with our podcasts with our own mobile app strategy, and you'll find them within all of our apps, not just the app devoted to podcasting. It's cross-sharing that material. It seems so basic, but you still have to make the choice. Since we're speaking about apps, I did want to mention we launched our first app back in November 11, and the goal was basically to experience mobile, be there for our audience, and make some revenue if we could. These are easy reader versions of our site, not the whole content but sort of the latest and most intriguing. And what we've learned is that mobile app audience is a hungry fan base. The AgWeb app here generates 2.4 million screen views a month from about 30,000 visitors. Websites are in the 2 to 5 visits per month typically on the publishing side. This app is 10 to 20. So we were once told that you build the apps for your top 20% of people who love you. They're the folks who will use it, and these numbers kind of back that up. So that's what I wanted to go through, and if you have questions, we're here to talk.
Thanks, James. That was short and to the point. So we do have a couple minutes for some questions, so I'm going to get to a couple of those. And any that we don't, we can post a Q&A later on. My first question is going to be for Dave. Somebody asked specifically about what you were presenting, and he said they were asking whether the look changes depending on the type of device being used, whether it's a computer, tablet, or iPhone. I'm assuming that's the idea, but could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so we build a mobile and a tablet version of everything. magplus has the ability to build it what you more or less would call responsive, but we've made kind of a strategic decision not to take advantage of that in that we design, for example, we don't design it so you can turn your iPad and all the elements of the page rearrange. magplus has that capability, but it complicates the design a little more to do that. And frankly, in our research of other digital publications, while in 2010 when the iPad came out, everybody was doing every layout so you could turn it and it would rearrange for the screen orientation. Most publishers don't do that anymore. So it actually helps us significantly, because what it does for us is it allows us to use what they used to call pixel perfect layout. So that's why I always say the digital publishing in the way that we do it is kind of a hybrid between traditional print publication and online digital responsive design. And what I mean by that is that in our what we call project owners, what other people might call internal clients, actually kind of like that, because when they're dealing with our web designers, they all kind of go, we really can't tell, even though we're designing this responsively, and we can't really tell you exactly what this layout's going to look like on any one device, because depending on what size their browser is set at, what resolution it is, literally just how they've got their window set up on their desktop computer, it could come out wildly different in appearance. Whereas the designs that we do using magplus, we're designing it in design, and what we're doing is we're telling our internal clients that, hey, the layout you're looking at, this is how it's going to look on any phone and every phone. And they actually like that a lot, because they can design it a lot more specific to their particular taste, and they don't have to worry that things are going to rearrange in a way that they're not expecting. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for that explanation. I think one more question here. Andrew, I wanted to go back to the New York Magazine use case that you highlighted, and you mentioned they're using in-app messaging and push notifications, and you mentioned also, the possibility of segmenting to kind of drive engagement there. Could you explain what would that look like in practice in terms of, segmenting and how they are targeting those messages?
Yeah, sure. So when we say segmented messaging, specifically what I'm referring to there is picking a certain subset of your user group, your audience, and using technology to send targeted messages to a very granularly focused audience. So for example, with New York Magazine, they actually have an analytical platform that will allow them to identify folks who haven't read the magazine in X amount of time. So we have our own console, and we also work with a number of third-party consoles. So if you've heard of like Urban Airship, or we work with a analytics platform called Localytics that provides this capability, you're actually able to see in your dashboard, the analytics that track back from the application itself include certain demographic info. Some the user actually self-selects, and some is collected by the application automatically. And we can customize that experience for publishers as well through custom development or third-party integrations. But let's say, for example, you want to send a message to anyone who hasn't downloaded the latest issue. You have your monthly issue November 2018, and anyone who hasn't opened it in the last 2 weeks, you can send a message specifically to those people only saying, hey, would you like to open the November 2018 issue? We notice you haven't downloaded it yet. Or you can say anyone on the West Coast. We actually worked with a major enterprise to do a disaster preparedness effort. So they could send a message to anyone in California saying, hey, we noticed there is a higher risk for a natural disaster in your area. Would you like to download the app to make sure that you're prepared? So it's just allowing you to engage your audience on a deeper level and provide tailored notifications and content that's specifically relevant to the people that are getting that message.
Thanks, Andrew. And James, are you also doing something in terms of content recommendations in the app?
Well, it's more of a manual process, sadly. But we do see a bump of about 20% when we segment our app alerting systems. So the notifications is where we've seen a lot of growth, but we do so not more generally. It's more segmented by audience members who have been in various segments. So if you've been down in our markets area or weather area, you will receive those notifications rather than just blindly sending notifications and hoping.
Thanks, James. So we're going to wrap up there. I think we're out of time for today. We'll try to get to some of these questions in a follow-up Q&A. But on behalf of Publishing Executive and magplus, I want to thank all of our speakers today, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Be sure to check out our webinar page to get information on all of our archived and upcoming webinars. This webinar will be available on demand, so you can share with colleagues. If you would just take a minute to fill out the brief feedback survey that will appear on your screen next, we would be grateful. Your feedback will influence the webinars we bring to you in the future, and I hope to see you in the next Publishing Executive webinar.